5:41 a.m. local time, Strait of Hormuz. 3 low contacts punch through the clutter almost at the same instant. Inside USS Abraham Lincoln's Combat Information Center, no one says a word for 2 full seconds. No one has to. The tactical display already says enough. 3 returns, small, fast, skimming so close to the water that they nearly vanish into sea clutter and the noise of civilian traffic. Then a 4th contact blinks into view behind them. Then another, even fainter, appearing just long enough to create doubt. The track supervisor leans toward his console. Multiple low contacts bearing 278 range closing. The room changes temperature, not in a literal sense, but operationally. Side conversations die. Chairs pivot. Headsets are adjusted tighter. The carrier is moving through one of the narrowest, most heavily watched waterways on the planet, and the surface picture has just stopped looking ordinary. On Lincoln's Bridge, the report arrives in a calm, level voice. CIC reports multiple low, fast returns west of the formation. The captain does not ask for drama. He asks for numbers. Speed variable, estimated high subsonic on the lead 3. Intermittent on trailing contacts. Altitude very low. Sea skimming profile possible. That last word lingers for less than a second. Possible, not confirmed. Not yet. Outside, dawn still hangs thin over the strait. Tankers creep through their lanes. Escorts maintain their sectors. The carrier's flight deck is active but not crowded. The rhythm is routine, controlled, familiar. Tractors move aircraft. Deck crews carry out the morning flow with one eye drifting toward the island. Then the first warning tone rolls through the internal nets, and routine ends without anyone needing to announce it. Off the starboard side of the formation, one screening destroyer tightens its radar sector and feeds a sharper picture back to the carrier. A second escort reports intermittent contact on the same group from a different angle. The image starts to form, not perfectly, but enough. Something is coming in low. Electronic warfare operators aboard Lincoln begin sorting through the noise. Coastal surveillance radar, merchant traffic, civilian transponders. Then something else. A thin pulse, brief, narrow. Too weak to classify on the first pass, but wrong for the traffic pattern and wrong for the morning. Possible remote guidance link, one operator says. Another answers immediately, or drone control. Not enough yet. The officer in charge cuts through both voices. Keep sorting. Don't chase ghosts. That is the challenge now. Not panic, not confusion, discrimination. In Hormuz, every screen is crowded, every mile is busy, and every mistake has a price. At 5:42, the lead contact disappears. It slips behind clutter and drops off the destroyer's surface picture. 2 seconds later, it shows up again closer than expected, slightly offset to the south. No one likes what that suggests. Either the track is maneuvering on purpose, or the formation is losing clean radar continuity at exactly the wrong moment. On the bridge, the captain gives the first real posture order. Set air defense watch. Tighten the screen. Log everything. No raised voice, no speech. Just a quiet shift from transit mode to threat posture. Across the strike group, the response is immediate. Escorts narrow their sectors and confirm engagement boundaries. A cruiser aft of the carrier sharpens the shared air picture. Link tracks stabilize, then waver again. The contacts are flying low enough that every sensor operator has to fight for clarity. On the flight deck, yellow shirts begin clearing exposed areas. A tow tractor pauses midway through a move, then continues under a new hand signal. Ordnance crews stop looking like men in a routine deck cycle and start looking like men who remember exactly which ship they are standing on. Nothing theatrical, just quicker hands, less wasted motion. At 5:43, bridge-to-bridge calls go out on guard frequencies. Unidentified aircraft or surface-launched contacts west of coalition traffic lanes. This is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. Identify immediately. No response. The call is repeated. Still nothing. Inside CIC, one of the trailing returns brightens for half a second. Its speed curve changes. Not random, not drifting, directed. Contact 4 now matching intercept geometry. The tracker says its projected line carries it deeper into the formation. That gets everyone's attention. Now the problem is no longer limited to the outer escorts. The geometry points to something more serious than harassment. Something is solving inward, not merely crossing the group's path, but angling toward its protected center, toward the carrier itself. A destroyer to the west makes the first hard assessment. Lead contact profile consistent with inbound anti-ship behavior. Not declared hostile yet. The threshold has not been crossed cleanly enough. But the language is tightening, and everyone on the net knows it. At 5:44, another emission slices across the spectrum, sharper this time. Brief, focused, not civilian. The tactical action officer looks up from his console. We may be seeing a layered approach. Small signatures in front, something heavier behind. No one answers. No one needs to. The room already understands. On Lincoln's Bridge, the captain watches the horizon through the glass while the carrier holds steady for 3 more seconds. Then he gives the order that tells the entire strike group the morning is over. Bring the formation to full defensive readiness. In CIC, the air defense coordinator leans into his headset. Stand by for weapons quality track. Then, from the western screen, one escort transmits the words every sailor on the net had hoped not to hear this early. Vampire profile, possible anti-ship intent, 5:44 local time. The first defensive round launches from the screen ship in a tower of white flame. From the flight deck of USS Abraham Lincoln, it is visible for less than 2 seconds. A violent vertical burst off the port horizon, bright against the early dawn, and then it is swallowed by haze and altitude. On the carrier's island, no one reacts on the outside. By then, they are already dealing with the next threat. Inside the Combat Information Center, the destroyer's voice cuts across the net, precise and clipped. Shot out. Track 1 engaged. No cheers, no release of tension, not yet. On Lincoln's tactical display, the lead inbound continues for a fraction of a second, then vanishes in a clean burst of fragmented returns. The interceptor worked, far enough out to create breathing room, far enough out to keep metal away from the formation, but the kill does not settle the room. It makes it colder, because as the debris cloud spreads, it exposes what had been hidden behind it. 2 more contacts, lower than the first, begin to separate from the clutter and hold their paths. One weaves, one stays steady. Between them, a third intermittent return flickers in and out, weak, small, and difficult to classify. The tactical action officer does not hesitate. Multiple inbounds remain. This is not a single shot. Across the strike group, the screen tightens again. One cruiser pushes its sector responsibility farther north. A destroyer off the starboard side shifts radar priority from wide area search to terminal quality tracking. At the center of it all, the carrier keeps moving. Huge, deliberate, pressing through one of the narrowest waterways on Earth while the outer ring begins fighting for time. At 5:45, the second inbound drops even lower. Contact 2, altitude decreasing. A tracker calls out that speed appears steady in a possible sea skimming profile. That is worse. High, fast threats give you geometry. Low, fast threats give you seconds. The destroyer nearest the western threat axis reports a second engagement. Another missile erupts from its cells and claws into the sky. This one does not climb as high. It angles outward quickly, solving low. Lincoln's bridge gets the update in real time. Second shot away, defending western sector. The captain's voice remains calm. Maintain course. Stand by for maneuver. That order matters. In the Strait of Hormuz, a carrier cannot simply swing wide and outrun the problem. Commercial lanes, escorts, shallow water, and the narrowness of the passage compress every option. Every change in heading affects the whole formation. On the flight deck, the tempo changes again. Yellow shirts wave handlers clear of one exposed lane. A tow tractor jolts an FA-18 into a safer position off the catapult track. Chain crews crouch lower. Helmets turn west each time another report comes in. No one is staring. Everyone is listening. Then the second intercept lands. This one is lower, harsher, closer. Not a distant flash high in open sky, but a violent white break just above the waterline, followed by a brief streak of burning fragments, skipping into the Gulf like pieces of thrown steel. The escort ship makes the call. Splash. Contact destroyed. Again, no relief, because the third contact survives. The weak return that had been flickering now sharpens and accelerates. Smaller signature, less predictable track. It jinks just enough to complicate a clean solution. Maybe drone-like, maybe a decoy, maybe something intended to draw attention away from something heavier still behind the raid. Lincoln's electronic warfare team is now seeing what looks like broken command link behavior mixed with surface emissions from the coast. One operator turns to the supervisor. They may be layering the raid, cheap front line, something more dangerous behind it. Keep working it, the supervisor says. We need certainty, not theory. At 5:46, one of the escorts reports radar saturation, not a full blackout. Not strong enough to blind sensors, just enough clutter, timing noise, and mixed signatures to slow classification by a few precious seconds. In open water, seconds can be managed. In Hormuz, seconds are oxygen. The third inbound now angles across the face of the screen instead of driving straight into the first destroyer's sector. That forces a handoff. One ship had the early look, another has the better firing line. The strike group does not debate, it executes. Shift engagement responsibility. Track 3 to starboard defender. On Lincoln's bridge, the carrier finally makes its first meaningful course adjustment. Not dramatic, just enough to complicate any shore-based firing solution and stretch the geometry for anything still working toward the center of the formation. Come right, steady, controlled, the captain orders. Do not open the lanes. The helm answers at once. Inside CIC, the turn redraws the picture. The carrier is no longer offering the same line to the inbound track. That may help, it may not. Everything now depends on whether the third contact is the real threat or just the distraction meant to pull eyes away from the next launch. Then something gets too close. A forward escort's close-in defense system begins to spool. Everyone on Lincoln who has heard that sound before recognizes it instantly, even through distance and steel. The rising mechanical shriek of a system shifting from standby to final guard. That means only one thing. Something has slipped through the outer ring. The burst comes seconds later. A short, tearing roar across the water. Controlled, violent. Through optics from the island and several external cameras, sailors on Lincoln catch sight of a tiny object breaking apart into sparks and dark fragments. Some of the debris splashes down near the escort's beam. Nothing hits the carrier. Nothing explodes on the flight deck. But the distance is close enough to erase any illusion. This isn't harassment. This is a real attempt to reach the formation. Before that realization fully settles, a cruiser south of the carrier pushes a new warning across the net. New contacts bearing shifting southeast, different axis, range increasing fast. The tactical action officer studies the display, then switches to the bridge circuit. The first wave wasn't the strike, it was the setup. Now a second group is coming in from another direction. 5:49 a.m. local time. One track ignores the outer escorts completely. It doesn't drift toward the nearest destroyer. It doesn't pass harmlessly across the formation's face. It keeps driving inward, cutting through the geometry with precision. Inside USS Abraham Lincoln's Combat Information Center, every watchstander reaches the same conclusion at the same time. This one is going for the carrier. Track holding centerline bias, the lead tracker says. Projected path now favors Lincoln. No visible reaction. That's what high-level training looks like. Hands move. Voices stay calm. Eyes stay locked on screens, not on each other, but the meaning hits hard. The first wave forced the screen to spend time, angles, and interceptors. The second wave is now probing the gaps. On the bridge, the report comes immediately. Captain, inbound profile is no longer screening. It's solving toward the carrier. The response is instant. Bring soft kill systems online. Prepare hard kill backup. Keep the screen synchronized. Below the island, across the carrier, the shift is felt more than heard. Internal circuits tighten. Damage control lockers stand ready. Flight deck control begins clearing anything that doesn't need to be exposed. Tractors reposition aircraft away from vulnerable lines. Chain crews drop lower, pulling tie-downs tight enough to keep steel from turning into shrapnel if something gets through. No one runs. Running wastes motion. Running spreads fear. The deck moves fast and low, like it is done in heavy seas and under worse noise than this. On Lincoln's tactical displays, the inbound stays low, fast, and uncomfortably close to the waterline. Another smaller contact moves ahead of it. Not exactly the same path, but close enough to divide attention. Drone, decoy, leaker. At this point, the label almost doesn't matter. The effect is the same. The strike group now has to solve two problems at once, and one of them is aimed straight at the heart of the formation. An escort cruiser takes the first shot. Shooter south. Weapon away. The interceptor launches and angles down toward the outer contact. Inside CIC, everyone watches the geometry tighten. For a moment, it looks clean. Then the smaller contact shifts. Not enough to escape. Enough to complicate. The intercept still connects, but later than anyone would like. A sharp burst low over the Gulf. Burning fragments scatter and skip across the surface. Splash one, the cruiser reports. No one relaxes. The main track is still there. Lincoln's electronic warfare team deploys the next layer. Decoys go active. Soft kill measures begin shaping the engagement space, trying to pull the incoming seeker away from its path. Operators watch for the smallest signs of success. A drift in track stability, a wobble in heading, a hesitation in the closing line. For 1 second, they get it. Track wandering, one operator says. Possible seeker disruption. Then the symbol steadies. Negative, it reacquired. That's when the room goes even quieter. Soft kill didn't fully break it. On the bridge, the captain doesn't wait for a recommendation. Come right 5 degrees. Increase separation from last solution line. Do not outrun the screen. The helm responds immediately. The carrier begins a controlled turn. Massive, deliberate. To an outside observer, it might look slow. To anyone working missile geometry in a narrow strait, it's immediate. Escorts adjust with her, careful not to block each other's sectors or open a gap on the opposite side. A destroyer along the new threat axis takes control. Western Defender has shot doctrine on the primary. Stand by. Inside CIC, the range keeps dropping. No drama, just numbers tightening. At 550, the inbound is close enough that Lincoln's inner defenses become critical. Close-in systems go fully active. They stop being background equipment and become the last line. Now the carrier itself is in the fight, not just the screen around her. Across the ship, sailors who can't see the displays feel the change through the deck, through the vibration, through the sound of systems shifting from ready to engaged. On the flight deck, a launch sequence that had been partially prepared is frozen. Aircrew remain strapped in but grounded. An aircraft that would have been airborne in minutes is now something that has to be protected where it sits. The destroyer fires. The call follows half a second later. Shot out, defending primary inbound. No one relaxes. This is the shot that matters. The interceptor drives low, and the tactical picture compresses into one brutal equation. Whether steel gets there before steel gets here. On the screen, the two tracks merge for a heartbeat. No one in CIC knows the outcome yet. Then the forward camera catches it first. A violent white bloom just above the water, closer than any previous intercept. Then a burst of orange fragments and a column of spray rising almost to the height of the escort's mast. The blast is not on the carrier, it's off the forward quarter, close enough that everyone on Lincoln understands what just happened before the report comes through. Primary inbound destroyed, the destroyer says. Very close aboard. Debris in the water. On the flight deck, a few sailors instinctively glance toward the blast direction. They're corrected immediately. Eyes on your work. That matters too. Discipline after a near miss is part of survival. A few burning fragments hiss into the Gulf. One arcs wider than expected and splashes near the formation's beam. No hits on the carrier, no fires topside, no mission kill, but there's no illusion left now. This wasn't a probe, this wasn't background noise. This was a coordinated attempt to reach USS Abraham Lincoln. Inside CIC, the tactical action officer leans toward the strike warfare console. We have enough. Build the launch chain. On the bridge circuit, the captain hears it and answers with 4 words. Find where it came from. That's the turning point. The strike group has absorbed the attack. Now it's shifting focus to the source. 6:03 a.m. local time. Smoke still hangs low over the water west of the formation as the first launch crews step into position on Lincoln's flight deck. The attack is over. The response is just beginning. From the outside, the carrier looks unchanged, steady, cutting through the Strait of Hormuz with destroyers and cruisers holding their sectors. But inside, everything has shifted. Minutes ago, the strike group was fighting for survival, sorting tracks, launching interceptors, trying to keep a sea-skimming threat away from the center of the formation. Now, that same network is doing something else. It's building a target package. Inside CIC, the tactical picture is no longer flashing red. It's stabilizing into something more precise. Evidence. Radar tracks from the inbound raid are replayed and layered with electronic intercepts, bearing lines, and timing windows. One console reconstructs the path of the final inbound. Another maps the spacing between the first and second wave. Electronic warfare specialists isolate the emissions that appeared just before the raid tightened on the carrier. A third team compares those signals to known launch patterns in the region. Possible coastal relay node here, one analyst says, marking a point along the northwestern axis. Launcher support farther inland, another adds. Timing fits. No speculation, no guesswork. Nothing is called until the data supports it. This is exactly what the strike group is built for, the moment when scattered signals turn into coordinates. On the bridge, the strike warfare commander lays it out clearly. Probable launch chain identified. Coastal radar queuing. Remote guidance support. Mobile launch element. At least one command node tied to raid timing. The captain doesn't hesitate. Take it apart. Below, in ready rooms and across the flight deck, the air wing is already moving. Yellow shirts guide the first aircraft into position. Ordnance crews move under the wings with speed, but no panic. A Super Hornet that was held back during the attack is now being turned into part of the response. Another lines up behind it. Then a Growler, its electronic warfare pods already mounted, built for the kind of mission that starts before anything strikes and continues after. The deck is loud now, but controlled. Jet blast, hand signals, chains pulled clear. Final checks done behind goggles and cranials. Less than 20 minutes ago, these same sailors were crouched low under threat. Now they're launching the aircraft that will remove the source of it. That's the difference on a carrier deck. The line between defense and response is measured in minutes. At 6:07, the first aircraft is brought to the catapult. The shuttle locks in. The holdback bar takes tension. Steam pressure builds. On the island, the air boss watches through glass and camera feeds, while the strike group maintains full defensive posture around him. Escorts stay active. Radar sectors remain tight. No one assumes it's over. A follow-up launch from the opposing side is still possible, especially now that aircraft are visibly being generated. That risk shapes everything. The launch cycle is compressed, but not rushed. Fighters go first. Electronic warfare support follows. Airborne coordination ties into the escort picture below. This isn't built for show. It's built for speed, coordination, and precision. Shooter ready. The signal drops. The first Super Hornet disappears off the bow in a blast of steam and sound, engines pulling hard into the morning air. Seconds later, another follows, then another. The Growlers launch next, lifting into the heat over the Gulf. Less visible, but just as critical. They're not there to strike first. They're there to disrupt, distort, and break apart whatever remains of the launch chain ashore. Inside CIC, controllers watch the air package spread and organize over the strait. Data flows in from every direction. Ship sensors, escort tracks, airborne feeds, electronic collection, all of it feeding into one shared picture. Then one of the suspected coastal emitters comes alive again. Too late. Radar node active, a controller reports. Confirm track handoff to the strike package, comes the reply. The response package does not L-rush blindly toward the signal, it shapes around it. That is the difference. The strike group is not reacting on instinct. It is taking apart a system. Far from the carrier, the Growlers move first. Nothing they do is visible from Lincoln's deck, but the effects appear almost immediately in the reporting stream. The radar node stumbles, spikes, then breaks into fragmented emissions. One command link drops, another tries to reroute. A support emitter farther inland appears for a moment, then disappears. They're losing coherence, an EW officer says. That opens the door. Moments later, the first release authority is approved. The strike aircraft commit. No speeches, no countdown, just a disciplined sequence of calls and confirmations as the package rolls in along pre-briefed axes to hit the points that mattered most in the attack. The coastal queuing site, the launch support element, the relay node that helped the inbound track stay aligned with the carrier's center line. The first impact report comes back clean. Target 1 effective, no reaction. Then another call follows. Target 2, secondary explosions observed. That matters. Secondary explosions mean fuel, munitions, or stored support systems. Something important was there. A third node goes dark without direct visual confirmation, likely abandoned or disabled under the pressure of jamming and the first wave of strikes. On the bridge, the captain watches the tactical map simplify in real time. Less than half an hour earlier, that same threat web had been reaching toward Lincoln. Now it is beginning to come apart. Still, the carrier does not ease up. The escorts remain armed and alert on the outer edge. The flight deck keeps one eye on recovery and one eye on the western sky. The strike package is still airborne. Hormuz is still narrow. Commercial traffic is still moving. And a damaged launch network can still be dangerous. Then the update every ship in the formation has been waiting for comes over the internal net. Launch site degraded. Follow-on targets available. That means the first blow landed. It also means the work is not over. 6:41 a.m. local time. The Strait of Hormuz is still crowded. Tankers remain in their lanes. Escorts continue sweeping their sectors. Radar keeps turning across the horizon in its endless cycle. From a distance, it could look like just another tense morning in a difficult stretch of water. But inside the screens and circuits of USS Abraham Lincoln's strike group, the picture has changed. The attack chain that reached for the carrier has been broken. Aboard Lincoln, post-strike assessment is already underway. In CIC, the same consoles that track the inbound threats now replay the fight in reverse. Not for drama, not for memory, for confirmation, bearings, launch intervals, emission spikes, intercept points. The data is layered again and again until the pattern becomes undeniable. The first wave forced the screen outward. The second tried to cut toward the center. The response package found the links that made that possible. One by one, the suspected launch-associated nodes along the western threat axis have gone quiet. A coastal radar queuing site is no longer transmitting. A relay point that briefly supported the second wave has disappeared from the spectrum entirely. Follow-on surveillance now shows disturbed ground, heat bloom, and scattered signatures where a mobile support element had been operating less than an hour earlier. No one in CIC calls it revenge. They call it degradation. That is the word that matters at sea. Not emotion, not rhetoric. Capability reduced, chain disrupted. The next attack made harder to execute. On the flight deck, the tempo shifts again. The raw urgency of the engagement is gone, but the deck is not relaxed. There is no cheering, no gathering around the island. Aircraft launched in response are now entering a recovery cycle that has to be handled cleanly, because in waters like these, one fight ending does not mean another is not already taking shape somewhere beyond the horizon. Yellow shirts reset the launch space. Green shirts service equipment. Plane captains wait beside their aircraft with that familiar carrier deck posture, half stillness, half readiness. A Hornet rolls back into position carrying soot and salt, looking less like a symbol and more like what it really is, a machine returning from a job. Nearby, another jet is already being checked for whatever comes next. That is how mornings like this work. Endure the strike, break the source, reset, stay ready. On the bridge, the captain stands where he stood when the first low contacts broke through the clutter. The view ahead is calmer now, but not safe. Safe is not a word commanders in Hormuz use casually. The formation has been restored, but the escorts remain outboard and alert, still guarding angles, still holding sectors, still ready to fire if another track appears low and fast over the Gulf. A destroyer west of the carrier reports no new launches. A cruiser farther south confirms the same. An airborne controller adds one more update from the returning strike package. Additional battle damage indicators suggest the command element tied to the raid is no longer functioning normally. Communications attempts are breaking down, delayed, rerouted, then disappearing entirely. For the next ship passing through the strait today, that matters more than anything else. Lincoln itself took no direct hit. That matters too. But the real measure isn't whether the carrier came through untouched. It's how close the attack came to becoming something more. Across the strike group, sailors have already reviewed the footage of the closest intercept, a white burst just above the waterline off the forward quarter, close enough to erase any doubt about intent. On a different morning, with a different delay, that geometry could have ended another way. No one lingers on that thought. Professional crews don't dwell on alternate outcomes. They log them, learn from them, and move on. At 6:48, the tactical summary is read across the command net. It's brief, direct, complete. Initial ambiguous low contacts. First confirmed hostile profile, outer screen engagement. Second axis raid. One primary track solving on the carrier. Close range intercept. Launch chain identified. Strike package deployed. Threat network degraded. No extra words, no speeches, just the engagement reduced to its essential parts. Outside, Lincoln continues through the strait exactly along its original course. That may be the clearest signal of all. The carrier didn't stop. It didn't break off transit. It didn't hand over the water to those who tried to reach it. It absorbed the attack, stayed in formation, and kept moving. For those who planned the strike or supported it, that's the worst possible outcome. Not just that the carrier remained intact, not just that the strike group responded, but that the formation stayed operational, stayed disciplined, and stayed on mission after the attack failed. In the end, this is what carrier warfare looks like in a place like Hormuz. No speeches, no panic, no dramatic victory laps, just steel, timing, procedure, and sudden controlled force that appears fast, ends quickly, and leaves the side that miscalculated with fewer options than it had an hour earlier. At 6:52 a.m. local time, USS Abraham Lincoln continues through the strait, escorts restored to full geometry, radars sweeping clean arcs across crowded water. Behind the formation, somewhere beyond the western haze, the launch network that tried to reach the carrier is now broken, burning, or silent. The attack lasted minutes. The response lasted longer. And in Hormuz, that's usually how you know who made the bigger mistake.